Welcome back to JavaScript Fundamentals. This is day 3, and we are going to pick up where we left off in day 2. We looked at some of the basic data types, numbers and strings, and Boolean values, and today we are going to work with some of those values, primarily numbers and strings. We're going to start with numbers because numbers are very easy. In fact, some of this is going to be review if you've had a basic math course. So let's start off by creating a variable called sum, and let's give it a value of performing an addition operation. Now, I'm using the technical term here. 4 plus 5 is an operation. It's an addition operation, and this plus sign is technically called an addition operator. So an operator is a character or a symbol that performs some type of operation. In the case of the addition operator, it adds two operands together, the 4 and the 5. On the left side is 4, on the right side is 5. So the addition operator works with two operands, left and right. It adds those operands together. And then we have another operator. This equal sign is called an assignment operator. And it too works with two operands. One on the left is the variable. The one on the right is the value or the expression that we want to assign to a variable. An expression is kind of what we have here, 4 plus 5. This expression needs to be evaluated first, and since it has an addition operation, that addition executes first, so we get a value of 9, and then that 9 is stored in the sum variable. I just threw a bunch of technical terminology at you, but don't worry, we're going to go over it again. I think it's very important for you to know what these terms are and what they mean, because every developer uses them. So even if you don't personally use them, anytime you talk to other developers or you read other material, these terms are going to be used. So an operator is a symbol that performs some type of operation. In the case of addition, we have the addition operator, a plus sign, and it adds two numbers together. The numbers are called operands. One is on the left-hand side and one is on the right-hand side, and it adds those two numbers together. The other operator in this statement is the equal sign. It's called the assignment operator. It takes whatever is on the right-hand side of the equal sign, this is the right-hand operand, and it assigns it to the variable on the left-hand side of the operator, which is the left-hand operand. And these are just two operators that we are going to talk about today. There's many other arithmetic-based operators, and then there's some that we can use when working with strings. Something else I should point out is this double slash followed by a 9. I think I used something like this in day 2, but I didn't explain it. This is a comment. This is nothing but text, and it is completely ignored by the JavaScript engine. So we can type just a bunch of gibberish, and that is perfectly fine because JavaScript is going to ignore whatever it is that we specify as a comment. Comments are primarily used for documentation. If we do something really wizardry, it would be nice to have a comment to kind of explain what that wizardry is doing. Ideally, we want to write as clear code as possible so that we don't have to use comments, but there are times when we will have to do so. So this double slash is a single line comment. Anything that appears after the double slash is going to be a comment. So we can comment this entire line just by putting a double slash at the very beginning of the line. There's also a multi-line comment that begins with a slash and an asterisk, and then it ends with an asterisk and a slash. So these two things are delimiters, and anything in between these delimiters are considered a comment. So this is a multi-line comment, and I misspelled multi-line, but comments can be as big as we need them to be or as small as we need them to be. So that's comments, both the single line and the multi-line. Let's look at the subtraction operator. So let's create another variable called difference. We'll use the same numbers, 4 minus 5. And as I said, this is going to be practically review for any basic math class that you've taken. We have addition and we have subtraction. Of course, the value that is assigned to the difference variable is -1 because it is subtracting 4 from, or it's subtracting 5 from 4, which is -1. And we've created these two variables in two separate statements. We can actually do this in one statement. And the reason why we would want to do so is because the JavaScript engine can execute one statement faster than multiple statements, even if we are creating multiple variables in that one statement. So there's just a few little changes that we have to make here. The first thing we need to get rid of is this first semicolon, and we want to replace it with a comma. And then we want to get rid of the second var keyword. And I'm going to use a tab to kind of line these two variable names up. In fact, white space really doesn't matter in JavaScript. Of course, it does matter between var and then the variable name, but we can actually get rid of all of the white space in between the operators. We can also get rid of the new line if we wanted to, but in doing so, we kind of lose some of the readability that we had before. So the general rule of thumb is to use white space to make things readable, and there's nothing wrong with white space, so use it. Okay, so back to defining multiple variables in the same statement. We are basically done here. All we need to do is separate each variable definition with a comma. So if we wanted to create another variable, we could do so by using a comma here and then creating another variable. Let's look at division. So we'll say, no, let's look at multiplication first, product. So the product will do 4 times 5. And the multiplication operator is an asterisk. It's not an X or a dot. In fact, we don't have that dot on the keyboard, so we use an asterisk for the multiplication operator. That is 20. And last is division, so quotient. And let's do 4 divided by 5. The division operator is the /. It's just one of those as opposed to 2 forward slashes for a comment, and the value of this is 0.8. These are the operators that we use in our code to work with numbers, but we're not limited to one operation in an expression. We can have as many operations as we want. So let's create another variable called foo, and let's do 4 plus 5 times 6 minus 8. And just like in normal math, there is an order of operations in JavaScript, and it's the same set of rules. So we do multiplication first, 5 times 6, which would be 30, and then we do addition, which would be 34, and then subtraction, which would be 26. And if this multiplication was actually an addition, the order of operation would be from left to right. So it would be 4 plus 5, 9, plus 6, 15, minus 8, 7. And even if this first operator was a minus sign, the order of operation would still be left to right because addition and subtraction are on the same level of order of operation as far as JavaScript is concerned. So it would still be left to right. So it would be 4 minus 5, which is -1, plus 6, which would be 5, minus 8, which would be -3. So the order of operation is exactly the same as it is in normal math, and we can modify the order of operation by using parentheses, just like we can in normal math. So in this case, we've modified the operation, so it would be 6 minus 8 that executes first. That would be -2, times -5, which would be 10, plus 4, which would be 14. So math in JavaScript is pretty much exactly like math in, that we learned in math class. The only difference primarily is the sign for multiplication and division, depending upon how it is that you learn division. There's one last thing that I want to show you before we talk about strings, and that is using a variable in a mathematical operation. So let's create a new variable called bar. Let's say foo plus 1. And this is taking the value of foo, which we said was 14. So it's using 14 plus 1, which is 15. Now we're not modifying foo in any way. We are just using its value and then adding 1 to it, and then assigning that value to the bar variable. So foo is still 14 even after line 2 executes. Well, let's get away from numbers for just a moment and talk about strings. And in fact, we can apply some of the arithmetic information to strings because there are times when we want to join 2 or more strings together to create a new string. But we don't use the word join. In fact, we use the word concatenate. Why? I really have no idea, because concatenate is a whole lot harder to say than join, but it is what it is. We say concatenate. The concatenation operator is the plus sign, which makes sense because we are adding 2 strings together to create a new string. So here we have one string, hello, with a comma and then a space. Then we have the concatenation operator, the plus sign, and then we have another string, world. And then the resulting value that is assigned to the foo variable is, guess what? Hello world. There is no formatting whatsoever with a concatenation operation. It is taking one string and taking the other string and smashing them together. So there's no added spaces, there's no commas, there's nothing. So you have to add the formatting yourself, which is why I added the comma and the space at the end of hello. Now you could have done that over here in world if you wanted to, or you could have concatenated another string. So now we have 3 strings and we are concatenating them together to form the one string hello world. So either way that you do it would be correct. However, the more you concatenate strings, the more of a performance hit your code is actually going to take. There's actually other ways that we can create strings that we will look at later, but string concatenation is one of those. There are many developers that don't like the fact that the plus sign pulls double duty in JavaScript, but JavaScript isn't unique in that aspect. There are many other languages that do the same thing, but some of the confusion comes when you start working with numbers and strings and using the plus sign, because that is something that you can do in JavaScript. So let's look at some examples. Let's start with something simple, 4 plus 5. This is obviously 9. But let's throw in a string. And even though this string contains a number, it is still a string value. And the string concatenation operator, the plus sign, is on the same level of precedence as the addition operator, the plus sign. So the order of operation is left to right in this case. So it's going to say 4 plus 5, which is 9. We've already established that. But then it's going to see this other plus sign, and it sees that on the right-hand side it's a string, and on the left-hand side is a number. So what actually happens is the number is converted to a string, and then a concatenation operation occurs. So the result is a string of 97. It's not a number. So let's look at what happens on the other side. If you guess you end up with a string of 76, you would be correct, because once again it sees that there is a string in the operation, so it's going to convert 6 to a string and concatenate the two together. Well, let's look at one more example. Instead of having one number, let's have 2 numbers. So let's do 5. Now we've already established that the string 7 plus the number 6 results in the string 76. So with the string 76 plus 5, what actually happens is 5 is converted to a string, and then the two are concatenated together, so we end up with 765. So this arithmetic operation never occurs. It is converted, the 6 is converted to a string first, and then concatenated with 7, and then 5 is converted and then concatenated to 765. So this is where some of the confusion comes from, because before you have a string within your expression, you perform mathematical operations. So this would be 4 plus 5, and then that would be converted to a string, and then concatenated with 7. And then 6 would be converted to a string, concatenated to be 976. Then 5 would be converted so that we would have 9765. So you might want to play around with string concatenation along with addition, because I can't really say that I do this a whole lot. In fact, I really don't see this used a whole lot, but there are going to be times when it does happen, and you definitely want to make sure that you know how this behaves, because it can be confusing, and I can understand why people don't like it, but then again, at the same time, once you learn it, then it kind of becomes second nature. So this kind of alludes to how you can convert a number to a string, because there are times you would want to do so. All you have to do is use the plus sign followed by what we call an empty string. It is a set of quotes that has nothing in there. So the result of this would be a string of 6. And as we can convert numbers to strings, we can also convert strings to numbers. There's a function called parseInt that we pass a string value to containing a number, and it will parse that number into a whole number. But there's another argument that we can pass to this function. Instead of passing 1, we pass 2, and we do so using the comma to separate these two values. And then the second argument is called the radix. It determines how this number is going to be parsed. We can parse it as binary, we can parse it as hexadecimal, but most of the time we want to parse it using the base 10 number system, which is what we are used to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's base 10. So we would just pass 10 there. And this would result in a numeric value being assigned to the foo variable. And it's important to note that the parseInt function only parses the string as long as it's parsing numeric characters. So for example, let's say that we have 3, 4, S, and then 5, 7 for this string. Well, the parseInt function is going to look at the first character. It's going to find a 3, so that's fine. It's going to look at the second character. It'll find a 4. That's fine as well. And then it will look at the third character. The third character is not a numeric value, so it is going to exit. It's going to return the value of 34, and it's not even going to bother trying to parse the rest of the string because it hit a non-numeric value. And if the string begins with anything but a numeric character, it's actually going to return a value called NaN, not a number. Now, you don't have to pass just strings to parseInt. You can pass a floating point number or a fractional number. Let's do 3.14. And this will parse the value 3.14 to a whole number, because an integer is a whole number. So the value assigned to foo would be 3. But there's also a parse float. And in this case, this is going to parse whatever we tell it as a floating point number. And a floating point number is a fractional number. So 3.14 is already a floating point number. So the value assigned to foo is 3.14. But if we have a string, then it is going to parse 3.14 as a numeric value and assign it to foo. So that's how you can convert strings to a numeric value, by using the parseInt and the parsefloat functions. And we'll stop here for today. In the next lesson, we'll look at functions, which is where JavaScript draws a lot of its power. So have a good one. I will see you tomorrow.